Commander Vex-Thul adjusted his ceremonial battle crown, admiring his reflection in the polished viewport of the Galactic Council's flagship. The 3-meter-tall Krillian stretched his 6 muscular arms, each one capable of crushing a small transport vessel. His purple exoskeleton gleamed under the artificial lighting, and his 4 compound eyes surveyed the detention bay with satisfaction. Ah, what a glorious day to demonstrate proper galactic hierarchy, he mused aloud, his voice carrying that particular brand of arrogance that only comes from never having been challenged. Today, we show these upstart humans their place in the cosmic order. Behind him, a dozen lesser officers from various species nodded enthusiastically. There was Quib 7, the insectoid Zephyrian, whose antenna twitched with nervous excitement. Beside him stood General Morp, a gelatinous Blobarian, whose translucent green form jiggled with each breath. The assembled crowd represented the finest military minds the galaxy had to offer. Or, so they believed. "Sir," squeaked Quib 7, his voice crackling through his translation device, "the human prisoner has been prepared for interrogation. Shall we begin the demonstration?" Vex-Thul's mandibles clicked together in what passed for a grin among his species. "Oh, absolutely. It's time these Deathworlders learned some respect. After all, we've conquered 17 systems this cycle alone. What's one more primitive species going to do? File a complaint?" The detention bay doors hissed open, revealing a sight that would have been comical if it weren't so tragic. In the center of the room, suspended by energy restraints, hung a single human male. He appeared to be in his 30s, with short brown hair and wearing the tattered remains of what had once been a merchant vessel uniform. His name tag, somehow still attached despite everything, read Captain Jake Morrison. "Well, well, well," Vex-Thul announced as he strode into the room, his boots clanging against the metal floor. "Look what we have here. A genuine Earth monkey, caught red-handed smuggling medical supplies to the Outer Rim colonies." Jake raised his head slowly, his blue eyes meeting the commander's gaze. There was something unsettling about those eyes, something that made a few of the more perceptive officers shift uncomfortably. But Vex-Thul, being blessed with the kind of supreme confidence that comes from never having faced real opposition, missed the warning signs entirely. "Medical supplies for refugee camps," Jake said quietly, his voice steady despite the restraints cutting into his wrists. "Vaccines for children. Food for families who lost everything when you decided their planets looked better as mining operations." "Silence!" Vex-Thul roared, spittle flying from his mandibles. "You will speak when spoken to, primate. Do you have any idea who you're addressing?" "I am Commander Vex-Thul of the Krillian Empire. I've personally overseen the subjugation of 43 worlds. I've made entire species extinct with a snap of my fingers." He gestured dramatically to his assembled officers. "Behold, the finest military minds in the galaxy. We represent civilizations that have mastered faster-than-light travel while your species was still discovering fire. And you? You're nothing but an insignificant speck from a backwater planet that barely figured out how to leave its own solar system." Jake's expression didn't change. If anything, he looked almost bored. Several officers exchanged glances. This wasn't the typical cowering they expected from lesser species. "Impressive resume," Jake said dryly. "I'm sure your mothers are very proud. Though I have to ask, if you're such accomplished conquerors, why did it take 12 of you to capture one unarmed merchant captain?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Quib 7's antenna drooped. General Morp's gelatinous form stopped jiggling entirely. Even the usually oblivious maintenance drones seemed to pause in their tasks. But Vex-Thul? "Oh, Vex-Thul was just getting warmed up. You dare mock us?" he snarled, advancing on the suspended human. "You miserable little creature! I'll show you what happens when lesser beings forget their place." What happened next would be analyzed by military historians for generations to come. Some would call it the moment the galactic balance of power shifted forever. Others would simply refer to it as the slap heard round the galaxy. Vex-Thul drew back one of his massive arms, the appendage capable of punching through reinforced bulkheads, and delivered what he intended to be a humiliating but non-fatal strike across Jake's face. The sound echoed through the detention bay like a thunderclap. Jake's head snapped to one side, a thin trickle of blood appearing at the corner of his mouth. For a moment, absolute silence reigned. Then, Jake slowly turned his head back to face his captor, and smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the kind of smile that appears on the faces of apex predators when they realize their prey has just made a fatal mistake. It was the smile of someone who had been waiting patiently for exactly this moment. "Well," Jake said, his voice still eerily calm, "that was disappointing. I was expecting more from the mighty Krillian Empire. My grandmother hits harder than that, and she's been dead for 20 years. Vex-Thul's compound eyes widened in disbelief. How are you still conscious? That blow should have knocked you unconscious for hours." "Oh, that little tap?" Jake chuckled, testing his jaw with a small rotation. "That was adorable. Really, it was. I've had more painful experiences stubbing my toe getting out of bed." The assembled officers began to murmur among themselves. This wasn't how these demonstrations were supposed to go. Usually, a single display of Krillian strength was enough to reduce any prisoner to a whimpering mess. "Impossible," Vex-Thul muttered, staring at his own hand as if it had betrayed him. "You're lying. You must be using some kind of enhancement technology." "Enhancement technology?" Jake laughed, and the sound sent chills down the spines of several officers. "Oh, that's rich." "No, Commander Vex-Thul. What you're experiencing is a little thing we humans like to call natural selection. You see, we're from what you so eloquently termed a death world. Do you know what that means?" The commander's mandibles clicked nervously, but he said nothing. "It means," Jake continued, his voice taking on an almost conversational tone, "that every single day of our existence, from the moment we're born until the moment we die, we're in a constant battle for survival. Our planet doesn't coddle us. It doesn't make things easy. It tries to kill us in ways your sheltered little mind can't even comprehend." He paused, letting that sink in. "We have weather patterns that can level entire cities in minutes. Predators that hunt in packs and can track prey across continents. Diseases that can wipe out entire populations if we're not careful. Volcanoes that can change our climate for decades. And that's just the stuff that's trying to kill us accidentally." General Morp's gelatinous form began to quiver nervously. "What? What do you mean, accidentally?" Jake's smile widened. "Oh, I'm so glad you asked, General. You see, then there's the stuff that's trying to kill us on purpose. Other humans." The room went dead silent. "We've been fighting each other for resources, territory, ideologies, and sometimes just for the sheer fun of it, for our entire recorded history. We've invented weapons that can obliterate entire continents. We've perfected the art of warfare to such a degree that we've had to create international laws just to make our conflicts slightly less horrible." Vex-Thul was beginning to look distinctly uncomfortable. That's barbaric." "Barbaric?" Jake tilted his head, thoughtfully. "Maybe. But it's also effective. You see, when your entire species has been forged in that kind of crucible for thousands of years, when survival itself requires constant adaptation and improvement, well, you tend to produce individuals who are somewhat more resilient than the average galactic citizen." "You're bluffing," Vex-Thul said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "One human against the entire Galactic Council? You're outnumbered 1,000,000,000 to 1. "Outnumbered? Yes," Jake agreed pleasantly. "But there's something you should probably know about humans, Commander. We don't really do surrender. It's not in our nature. When you corner us, when you threaten our families, our friends, our way of life, well, That's when we get creative. Quib 7's antenna twitched frantically. Sir, perhaps we should return the prisoner to his cell and reconsider our approach. Nonsense, Vex-Thul snapped, but there was a slight tremor in his voice now. He's just one human. What's the worst he could do? Jake's laugh filled the detention bay, and this time, even the maintenance drones stopped what they were doing. Oh, Commander, he said, shaking his head in apparent sympathy. You really shouldn't have asked that question. Why not? Vex-Thul demanded. Because, Jake said, his smile becoming positively predatory. You're about to find out. What happened in the next 5 seconds would become the stuff of legend. But to understand the full impact, one must first appreciate the delicate political situation that existed in the galaxy at that moment. The Galactic Council had spent centuries building a carefully balanced hierarchy of species. At the top sat the ancient civilizations like the Krillians, the Vorthak Empire, and the Celestial Dominion. These species had achieved interstellar travel millennia ago and had used their technological advantages to subjugate younger civilizations. Below them were the client species, civilizations, that had been uplifted and allowed to participate in galactic society in exchange for resources, labor, or military service. These species lived comfortable lives, protected by their patrons and content in their assigned roles. At the bottom were the primitive species, worlds that had recently achieved space travel or were still in the process of developing it. These civilizations were considered potential resources to be either uplifted as clients or conquered as slaves, depending on their usefulness. Humanity fell firmly into this last category. They had only recently developed faster-than-light travel, and their technology was considered crude by galactic standards. Their political systems were chaotic, their military tactics primitive, and their social structures barely above barbarism. Or so the Council believed. What they failed to understand was that humanity's apparent primitiveness was actually a strength. While other species had spent millennia in comfortable, stable hierarchies, humans had continued to evolve, adapt, and innovate. They had been forced to, because their world never stopped trying to kill them. Commander Vex-Thul was about to learn this lesson the hard way. The energy restraints holding Jake suddenly flickered and died, not because of any malfunction, not because of outside interference, but because Jake had been systematically overloading them for the past 10 minutes by manipulating his body's bioelectrical field in ways that the restraint system's designers had never anticipated. How? Vex-Thul began. But Jake was already moving. Humans, it should be noted, are persistence predators. They evolved to chase prey across vast distances, wearing them down through sheer endurance and determination. But they're also ambush predators when the situation calls for it, capable of explosive bursts of speed and violence that can overwhelm much larger opponents. Jake hit the deck rolling and was on his feet before any of the assembled officers could react. His first target was the weapons locker on the far wall, because humans are also tool users, and the first rule of human warfare is always bring a bigger stick. Quib 7 managed to get his sidearm halfway out of its holster before Jake's fist connected with his thorax. The sound was like a walnut being cracked, and the Zephyrian officer crumpled to the floor, his antenna twitching weakly. General Morp had better reflexes. The Blobarian's gelatinous form extended pseudopods toward Jake, trying to ensnare him in a crushing embrace. But Jake had already anticipated this, dropping and rolling between the general's supports. As he passed beneath the Blobarian, he grabbed a maintenance tool from the floor and jabbed it directly into Morp's core matrix. The general's scream was like the sound of a deflating balloon, and his form collapsed into a puddle of quivering green gel. All of this happened in approximately 2 seconds. Vex-Thul, meanwhile, was still trying to process what he was witnessing. In his entire career, he had never seen a single individual move so fast, strike so precisely, or adapt so quickly to changing circumstances. "Guards!" he bellowed. "Sound the alarm. All units to the detention bay." But Jake had already reached the weapons locker. The magnetic locks that should have taken a team of technicians several minutes to bypass yielded to a combination of brute force and creative rewiring that took Jake exactly 8 seconds. As alarms began to blare throughout the ship, Jake emerged from the locker armed with a plasma rifle, 2 sidearms, and a rather intimidating collection of explosive devices. "You know, Commander," he said conversationally as he checked the rifle's power cell, "there's an old human saying you might find relevant to your current situation." Vex-Thul was backing toward the exit, his earlier bravado evaporating rapidly. "What saying?" Jake's smile was the stuff of nightmares. "Never corner. Something meaner than you are." The detention bay doors slammed shut. Jake had activated the emergency lockdown, trapping them all inside. The commander's compound eyes darted around the room, looking for an escape route, but Jake had positioned himself between Vex-Thul and every possible exit. "Now then," Jake said, raising the plasma rifle, "I believe we were in the middle of a demonstration about proper galactic hierarchy?" The remaining officers cowered against the walls, suddenly understanding that their carefully maintained galactic order had just encountered something it wasn't designed to handle. A human with nothing left to lose. Outside the detention bay, the ship's crew was scrambling to respond to the crisis. Security teams were rushing through corridors, engineering was trying to override the lockdown, and the bridge was attempting to contact other Council ships for assistance. But they were all making the same fundamental mistake that had led to this situation in the first place. They were thinking like civilized beings. Jake Morrison, on the other hand, was thinking like a human. The next 30 seconds aboard the Galactic Council flagship would later be studied in military academies across 17 different star systems, not as an example of proper tactical doctrine, but as a cautionary tale about what happens when superior technology meets superior desperation. Jake stood in the center of the detention bay, plasma rifle trained on Commander Vex-Thul, while the ship's emergency klaxons wailed like banshees. Through the reinforced viewport, he could see the massive Krillian battlecruiser Times, Eternal Dominance Times, maneuvering into position alongside 2 Vorthak destroyers and a Celestial Dominion dreadnought. "Impressive response time," Jake commented, glancing at the assembled fleet. "I count 4 capital ships, probably 60 fighters, and what looks like a planetary bombardment platform. All this for little old me?" Vex-Thul's mandibles clicked nervously. "You cannot possibly believe you can fight an entire fleet, human. Surrender now, and your death will be quick." "Quick death?" Jake chuckled, but there was no humor in it. "You really don't understand humans at all, do you? See, that's your first mistake right there. You're offering me a reward for giving up." The commander's compound eyes blinked in confusion. "Reward? Death is a reward? For someone who knows he's going to die anyway?" "Absolutely." Jake's finger hovered over the rifle's trigger. "But here's the thing, Commander. I'm not planning to die alone." The ship shuddered as docking clamps engaged. Through the internal communications system, they could hear barked orders in multiple alien languages as assault teams prepared to breach the detention bay. 10 squads of your finest shock troops, Jake observed, listening to the chatter. Pulse cannons, force shields, neural disruptors. Really pulling out all the stops, aren't you? Vex-Thul straightened slightly, some of his earlier confidence returning. "You see? You are surrounded, outgunned, and outnumbered. Even if you kill me, you will not escape this ship alive." "Escape?" Jake looked genuinely puzzled. "Who said anything about escaping?" Before the commander could respond, Jake pressed a sequence of buttons on his stolen plasma rifle. The weapon's power cell began to emit a high-pitched whine that made every alien in the room take an involuntary step backward. "You see, while you were all standing around congratulating yourselves on how superior you are, I've been making some modifications to this lovely piece of technology. Jake held up the rifle, its power indicator now flashing red. Turns out, if you reverse the polarity on the containment field and overload the fusion chamber, you get a rather spectacular chain reaction. The blood drained from what little color Vex-Thul's exoskeleton possessed. You're bluffing. No one would destroy themselves just to. What? Take out a few dozen council officers? A flagship? Maybe cripple your entire task force? Jake's smile was Arctic cold. Commander, let me tell you something about humans that your intelligence reports apparently missed. We invented the concept of mutually assured destruction. We built weapons that could sterilize our entire planet, aimed them at each other, and then sat on them for 50 years just to prove a point. The detention bay doors began to glow cherry red as cutting torches worked on the other side. The assault teams were almost through. The point being, Jake continued conversationally, that if someone threatens something we care about badly enough, we will absolutely burn down the universe to stop them. And right now, you've threatened every human colony in the Outer Rim. Vex-Thul was backing away now, his 6 arms spread in what his species considered a gesture of supplication. Wait! We can negotiate! What do you want? Safe passage? Prisoner exchange? Name your terms! Terms? Jake laughed, and the sound echoed off the bulkheads like breaking glass. Oh, Commander, you still don't get it. I'm not here to negotiate. I'm here to send a message. The cutting torches broke through. Armored figures began pouring through the breached doorway, their weapons trained on Jake. He counted them automatically, a habit drilled into him during his military service before he became a merchant captain. 23 hostiles, various species, all carrying weapons capable of reducing him to component atoms. "Drop your weapon!" shouted the squad leader, a heavily augmented mechanoid whose voice boomed through external speakers. "Surrender immediately, or face immediate termination." Jake looked at the assembled force, then at Commander Vex-Thul, then at the plasma rifle in his hands, with its ominously flashing power indicator. "You know what the really funny part is?" he said to no one in particular. "You could have just let me deliver those medical supplies. All I wanted was to help some sick kids and hungry families. But no, you had to make it about dominance and hierarchy and showing off how tough you are." He raised the rifle, not at the assault team, but at the detention bay's main power coupling. Every weapon in the room swiveled toward him. "Don't!" Vex-Thul screamed. "If you damage that coupling, it'll cascade through the entire power grid. The containment fields for the antimatter reserves will fail." Jake paused, his finger on the trigger. "The entire ship? The entire ship. Everyone aboard will die. Including you? Including me?" Jake considered this for a moment, his expression thoughtful. Then he nodded slowly. "Good." What happened next lasted exactly 1.3 seconds, according to the ship's computer logs that were later recovered from the wreckage. Jake pulled the trigger. The plasma bolt struck the power coupling with surgical precision, exactly where the human had calculated it would cause maximum system failure. The resulting cascade of electrical feedback raced through the ship's neural pathways like wildfire, overloading circuits, frying processors, and causing every automated system to fail simultaneously. Emergency lighting flickered and died. Life support stuttered. Artificial gravity fluctuated wildly, sending everyone in the detention bay floating toward the ceiling before slamming them back down. But most critically, the magnetic containment fields holding the ship's antimatter fuel reserves began to collapse. The Galactic Council flagship times Pride of Krylia times had exactly 47 seconds before total annihilation. In the chaos that followed, as alarms screamed and emergency protocols kicked in, Jake Morrison did something that would be remembered for generations. He laughed. Not the bitter, cold laugh of earlier, but genuine, delighted laughter, as if he had just heard the funniest joke in the universe. "You magnificent idiots," he said to the floating, panicking aliens around him. You actually thought you could intimidate a species that turned nuclear warfare into a spectator sport. Commander Vex-Thul, drifting helplessly near the ceiling, managed to gasp out, "The escape pods! We have to reach the escape pods!" "Oh, absolutely," Jake agreed cheerfully. "You should definitely try that. Just one tiny problem, though." "What problem?" Jake held up a small device he had palmed during his raid on the weapons locker. "I may have disabled the escape pod launch systems while you were all busy threatening me. Seemed like the prudent thing to do at the time." The horrified realization that dawned on Vex-Thul's face was something that would have been beautiful to behold if there had been anyone left alive to see it. But there wasn't. 23 seconds later, the Times Pride of Krylia Times became a very brief, very bright star in the void of space. The explosion was visible from 3 systems away and left a debris field that would puzzle xenoarchaeologists for centuries. The other ships in the task force, caught completely off guard by their flagship's sudden transformation into a miniature supernova, scrambled to retreat to minimum safe distance. Their sensors, designed to detect enemy weapons, signatures, and tactical movements, were utterly unprepared for the kind of suicidal tactics that Jake Morrison had just demonstrated. Admiral HFY of the Vorthak destroyer times Merciless Talon times stared at his tactical display in stunned disbelief. "Scan the debris field," he ordered his sensor operator. "Look for any signs of survivors." "Admiral," his communications officer interrupted, "we're receiving a transmission. It's from Earth." "Earth? How did they know what happened here? We haven't even filed our report yet." "Sir, the transmission was sent 14 hours ago. It's addressed to any Galactic Council forces in this system." Admiral HFY felt a chill run through his carapace. "Put it on screen." The holographic display flickered to life, showing a middle-aged human woman in what appeared to be a military uniform. Her hair was steel gray, her eyes were the color of winter storms, and her expression was absolutely neutral. "Greetings," she said in perfect galactic standard. "I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Force. By the time you receive this message, one of our citizens will have been taken prisoner by Galactic Council forces in this system." The assembled bridge crew exchanged nervous glances. "Let me be very clear about something," Admiral Chen continued. "Captain Jake Morrison is a civilian merchant marine transporting medical supplies to refugee colonies. He is not a military target. He poses no threat to galactic security, and he has committed no crimes under any rational interpretation of interstellar law." She leaned forward slightly, and her voice took on an edge that could have cut diamond. "However, we are aware that certain council species have a tendency to view humans as lesser beings, suitable for intimidation and abuse. We want to correct this misconception." Admiral HFY's mandibles began to click involuntarily. "Captain Morrison has been provided with certain equipment and training that he will use if threatened. He has also been given very specific instructions on how to respond to any attempt to harm, torture, or humiliate him." The human woman's smile was possibly the most terrifying thing any of them had ever seen. "Those instructions are quite simple. If you hurt him, he will hurt you back. If you threaten him, he will eliminate the threat. If you attempt to make an example of him, he will make an example of you." She paused, letting that sink in. "Captain Morrison is not unique in this regard. Every human civilian operating in Council space has received identical equipment and training. We call it the Porcupine Protocol. Make us bleed, and we will make you remember why." The transmission flickered for a moment before continuing. "By now, you have undoubtedly learned that humans do not respond to intimidation the way other species do. This is because we evolved in an environment where backing down meant death, and fighting back meant survival. We have carried this philosophy with us to the stars." Admiral HFY was beginning to understand why his species' intelligence reports on humanity had been so inadequate. Consider this a learning experience, Admiral Chen said. The next time you encounter a human, remember that we are not prey animals. We are not slaves waiting to be collared. We are not lesser beings who will cower before your superior technology. Her eyes seemed to bore through the screen directly into each viewer's soul. We are the species that survived the death of the dinosaurs, ice ages, plagues, world wars, and our own attempts to annihilate ourselves. We are the species that looked at a universe trying to kill us and decided to punch back. The transmission began to fade. Captain Morrison's sacrifice will not be forgotten. His message will be heard throughout the galaxy. And the next human you encounter will be carrying the same message, the same training, and the same absolute refusal to be your victim. As the hologram dissolved, Admiral Chen's final words echoed through the bridge of the Time's merciless Talon asterisk. Welcome to the neighborhood. The aftermath of what became known as the Morrison incident rippled through galactic politics like a shockwave. Within 48 hours, every major news network in Council space was running analysis pieces on humanity's disproportionate response doctrine. Within a week, the Galactic Stock Exchange had lost 12% of its value, as investors fled from any company with assets in human-controlled space. Within a month, the Council's Intelligence Division released a new threat assessment that reclassified humanity from primitive client species to existential threat, requiring immediate diplomatic accommodation. The report's executive summary was remarkably brief. It read, in its entirety, "Do not slap the humans." But the real impact of Jake Morrison's final 5 seconds was felt on a smaller, more personal level. Throughout the galaxy, in bars and meeting halls and private communications, the same question was being asked over and over again. If one human could do that much damage, what could 1,000,000 of them do? The galaxy, as it turned out, really didn't want to find out.